Good evening, all of you. Can we wait for another 2 or 3 minutes? People are getting in. Thank you. program now. Thank you all for joining us very much on time today. Hope the yesterday's session was very useful to all of you. And I'm sure the remaining days will also be very useful to you. Before starting into the session, before introducing the speaker of the day, I just want to give you 4 requests. It's not instruction. Please change your screen name as your name, because when some of you you go out and come back, or your call get disconnected and come back, we are not sure whether the same participant is coming back. So this request is because of that. And please enter your name and institution's name in the chat box. So that will also give us an indication that you are there. And please put your questions during the session, or just before end of the session, put your questions in the chat box. Depends upon the time, all your questions will be answered by the resource person. And feedback, like yesterday, feedback will also be sent in the chat box. Please fill up the feedback and send. That will be considered as an attendance for the program. And also give us time to receive your certificate. After a week, within a week after the last day of the program, the certificates will be sent to you. And as you all know, this is the series. It's a professional development program for 5 days, and we are in the second day. And today's topic is from research to publication, the practical insights. And the speaker of the day is one of the coordinators of this program, Dr. J.S. Gunawati. Dr. J.S. Gunawati is an associate professor at Madras School of Social Work. She is teaching MSW program, HR specialization, and she's also teaching MPhil and guiding PhD scholars. She has done her MSW, MPhil, and PhD in social work, and she has also done 3 PG diplomas in various titles like international business, PG diploma in higher education, PG diploma in education management and administration. Madam Gunawati has served in various capacities inside the college and outside the college. Like she was the board of member, chairman, board of studies for social work. And she served as a controller of examinations at Madras School of Social Work, and she was the coordinator for IQAC at Madras School of Social Work. And she's the chairman of board of studies in various other universities. And to point out about her scholarly contribution, published a number of journal articles, and she has presented papers both at national level and abroad also. Published more than 10 articles in various reputed journals. And she has co-authored some books. She has published case studies, book chapters, and book review. She has participated in UGC and AICTE sponsored workshops and workshops organized by IIT and IIMs. She has also undertaken UGC sponsored minor research projects and various other consultancy services. And she served as a resource person for various technical sessions. She served as a chairperson for the paper presentation in national and international conferences. She reviewed articles. I think that is very important for this session. She being the resource person, she reviewed articles for the Indian Journal of Social Work, South Asian Journal of Management, Journal of Association of Management Development Institutions in India, and various other journals. She evaluated MPhil and PhD thesis, serving as a recognized guide under University of Madras, and she is a member of doctoral committee of University of Madras, and she has organized various UGC and other sponsored workshops. So I'm sure she will give lots of input on the topic today, and you will have enough to take away with you on the topic. So please stay with us and get insight from her. And now I request Dr. Gunawati to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakti. Thank you all for the warm words. Now, before I start, I just want to share a couple of things. One, I'm still a work in progress, so though my profile would have been very exhaustive, I still believe that we are all work in progress, so I'm very much with you. So I'm here to share my experiences, what I have learned by doing, what I have learned by making mistakes, and also what I learned from others. So that's the context in which I want to make this presentation. So I am very much one among you, so I am very much open to learning from you. So I want to set that straight. Number two, because I'm from the social work background, most of my context is from the social science research. So how much I will be able to relate with other technical research, I'm not very sure. So kindly bear with me. Third, this being a heterogeneous group, some may be making baby steps, some could be accomplished researchers. So I would like to touch upon the fundamentals and share some practical input so that it's much viable for us to convert our research work into publication. Another one I want to point out is this presentation is more a sequel to the previous one. So if some have not participated in yesterday's workshop session, I would like to start with a brief recap. Okay, we put the next slide, please. Shakti. Okay, in terms of scheme of presentation, I'll be touching upon, as I told, the what we learned in the previous session. Number two, I would like to demystify this concept of scholarly publication. Everybody expects us to make publications, present papers, publish papers. So what is this all about? Sometimes when we do our MPhil PhD, we are referred to as scholars, research scholars, not students. So I want to demystify what this research publication concept is all about. So that would be a small portion of my presentation. Then unless we have the research straight, we will not be able to make the publication well. So a lot depends on the input, which is the research per se. So a major portion of the presentation will be focused on how to make our research foolproof so that it is publication worthy. So that will be one major portion. Next, writing for a thesis is very different from writing for an article. So what does it mean to write for a journal publication? So that would be the next milestone in my presentation. And finally, I would like to close with some practical insights. Okay, going on to the next thing is what did we learn yesterday? We had a wonderful session by Dr. Rupashree yesterday, Associate Professor DOMS, and Madam spoke about why we need to publish and what does it mean to publish and the structure of research articles and how to submit our manuscript and also what are the tips in terms of taking it forward. Now, when she talked about submission of manuscript, she talked about the protocols, the cover letter, the review comments, responding to the review comments, etc. So this is what we learned. In a way, we'll be going in sync with what we learned yesterday, but slightly different. So moving on to the next slide. Now we first need to understand what research is so that we can consciously and confidently move from research to publication. So when you are talking about research, I just want to highlight the three keywords that I have put it in bold. First, we are all academicians, so I don't want to start from the basics, but number one, it should be systematic. Second, it is with the support of existing or demonstrable facts. So in a sense, it's not our own tall claims. It's based on logical reasoning. It's based on inferences from existing findings, what others have done. So that highlights the role of literature. And then it's an answer to a question. So that highlights the meaning of a research question. So when you talk about research, we need to address this. One, we have to answer or we have to have the research question right. Number two, we have to rely on existing literature. Three, it has to be done in a very systematic manner so that the outcome is done right. Now, coming on to the term scholarly, again, the keywords here means it involves detailed study. So we need to question ourselves, so how detailed is our study when it comes to our own work? So are we still in level 1, level 2, or are we accomplished? I'm sure there's more to learn, but we should always try to ensure that our learning is detailed. Okay. Then when we come into academics, when we talk about literature that concerns us as academicians, we rely a lot on books, journals. It could be the print or the e-format. It could relate to, gray literature, which includes your unpublished thesis, newspaper articles, reports, and so on. Now, this is the background in which we talk about publication. So we move on to the next thing, which is scholarly publications. It refers to peer-reviewed journal articles. So what do we mean by peer-reviewed? It means that the manuscript is published after thorough critique or review. So when you're talking about critique, you're not actually criticizing anybody, but actually evaluating the merits and the demerits of a particular writing or a piece of work based on what somebody professes or claims to report. So that is the context in which we are critiquing. And now, when we say it is scholarly, why is it scholarly? One, it involves detailed study. Number two, it is written by professionals in the field because they are experts. They have that experience, an expert of doing something. Now, does it necessarily have to be empirical papers? No. Why? Because it includes concept papers. Concept papers can be papers which bring out propositions based on which future research can be taken forward. So concept papers are very much part of scholarly literature. We have empirical papers. We also have literature reviews and other kinds. So it's just not research articles that constitute scholarly publication. That's my point here. Now, when we talk about scholarly publication, we have to pay attention to 3 R's. First one is reading. That means we have to read a lot, we have to study a lot so that we can come out with something noteworthy. So it involves a lot of reading. Number two, it needs a lot of reflection. That means we need to reflect on what we have read. We have to synthesize our thoughts, our views, our inputs so that we can come up with new pieces of information. And then we also need to review ourselves, review existing work, review the way forward so that there is progress. So we need to address these 3 R's if we really want to come up with something scholarly. Now, as authors or as prospective authors, it just does not suffice for us to be well versed in our field of specialization. I mean, say if you want to write about, now everybody is talking about, say if you're talking about the migrant crisis in the COVID situation, that could be a vast area. But if you're a king of that, but lacking in terms of research skill or your academic writing skills, then it will not be a win-win situation. So as a scholar, we need to have a three-pronged approach, or a triangulated approach in terms of having knowledge in our subject matter, knowledge in terms of your research methods, and knowledge in terms of your academic writing techniques. Now, when I say knowledge, it's just not knowing how to do things, but also having the skills to getting it done. So, these are the basics. I just want to draw your attention to one of the reports given in the British Medical Journal. It's one of the top journals. In fact, they are having a program in association with University of California called the Research to Publication Program. So increasingly, journals are investing a lot on strengthening research. Why? Because they want good, noteworthy publications also in a way to sustain the pipeline so that they have good issues that are released. So in this particular write-up by the director of the academic outreach wing of BMJ, they're saying that sometimes or most times they're saying 80% of health, 85% of health research. That means a large portion of work goes unaccounted for or wasted. Why? Because they ask the wrong questions. It is badly designed. That means they ask the wrong research questions. The focus is not right. Number two, it's badly designed. That means there's no rigor. It's not foolproof. And it's not published. Sometimes even most of us, our PhD thesis, our MPhil, except for the publications required as a prerequisite for submission of the thesis, how many of us make it a point to publish our own work? So quite often it's unpublished. So most of our work is, it's not disseminated. When we are talking about the research process, dissemination of information is very, very vital. Why? Because it is the basic for our literature. Sometimes it's poorly reported, and we don't highlight what is to be highlighted. It's not. We are not pitching it in the right journals, so we are not able to get visibility. So there are a lot of quite a few issues in terms of that. So we need to. So these are some issues that concern publication. Everybody has the research potential, but it's not converted into performance. So that's a big issue. So in this context, we need to, if we have to address a session on research to publication practical insights, I think unless we talk about the practical insights concerning research, we will not be able to do justice to the entire concept or entire gamut of research to publication. So I just want to throw light on the research process. We all would have gone through the process, but just touching on the milestones because my entire presentation is structured in line with your the research process. As we all know, it all starts with the topic identification, which is very important, and then it moves on to your theoretical approach, your literature review. Of course, literature review plays a significant role in different milestones of our research process. And then we need to move on to the problem definition because problem identification is very different from definition. Definition uses a lot of focus. And then we move on to our research methods. And then your tool construction is one major milestone. Then sampling, data collection, then analysis and reporting. So these are the major milestones in our research. Slide 8. Now, taking drawing from the research process, we move on to an author called Versheren and others who talk about what it means to design a research. So they say when you want to design a research, you have to pay attention to the conceptual design of a particular research work and also the technical design. By conceptual definition design, they're referring to, I'm going to the next slide, slide 9. So by conceptual design, they're referring to problem definition, research questions, research objectives, conceptual model, and operationalization. By technical design, they're referring to research design and reporting. So we need to pay attention to all this, take the required checks and balances so that the research outcome is good, so that it becomes publication worthy. Because unless we have the right stuff, we will not be able to come out with the right output. So without the right, we have the acronym GIGO. So unless we have the right garbage in, garbage out. So unless we have the right input, we'll not be having the right output. So we need to pay attention at all these stages so that we have the right inputs. So the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about what all can we do to ensure that our work is foolproof. How can we strengthen our research findings or our outcomes or what we claim as an outcome of our work. So first one is the research identification step. Now, I just have a one-liner about what it means because if there are people who need to brush up, so it's useful for them. So essentially, it talks about identifying the area of your research. That means your trust area, what you want to work on. Definitely, there are some do's and don'ts in doing it. But the key, the primary do is it should be original. Replication of research work is okay, but there's no fun in it because somebody has already done. So just because we do it in a different point in time or with a different target audience, I don't think there's much takeaway in that. So I think it's best to be original, and I'm sure I tell my students also each one has their own thumbprint. So I think that originality is imbibed in us. So if we think a bit, I'm sure we'll have our own original ideas. So originality is a must. Then your topic should be interesting, it should be significant, and it should also have some, longevity in its lifespan. It should not be a sporadic event that you want to study, and so by the time you come for your data collection stage, the issue is not there. So it should have some longevity. Above all, it should have feasibility. That means it should be doable. Say, for example, if somebody wants to study the lifestyle of global leaders, it may be a good topic, but when it comes to data collection, do we have the wherewithal to do contact such people, collect data from them? So we may be stuck at the data collection stage. Sometimes we take up fancy topics, jargons. It's nice to talk about, but people get stuck even during the review of literature stage. So we have to manage all that, keep the end in mind, and ensure that it is feasible. I generally tell my students, think even about your tool when you're planning for your research. That means your initial stage. So let's not get tied down to topics because we like it or we think it's fine, but get stuck when it comes to your data collection. So I think we should see the end and then plan accordingly. So feasibility is a must. Let's not take topics just because it's convenient or there is lack of take topics that there is absolutely no depth, there's no conviction, or if there's some replication also, it's better to avoid. So let's somehow bring the originality flavor into research. I think that should be the focus of every researcher. Now, how do we identify topics? It's easier said than done because it needs a lot of introspection, because I use the term reflection. So that aspect of reflection is also required in your identification of your problem. So it starts with your reading, your academic discussions with your fellow scholars. You go to forums which talk about it so that you get some insights, and then you keep track of emerging trends, so that way you get some views. Or based on your own interests, you can choose your own topic based on your own intuition. Or sometimes it's academic compulsions. I mean, say you get a grant for doing a particular thrust area research, then that way we are tied to that particular focus area. But come what may, I think it's best to have our interest in it, otherwise we may get lost. The second aspect, so these are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to problem identification. So moving on to the next stage, which is literature review. So it includes conceptual and empirical literature, and as I initially told, literature review has different functions at different stages of the research. For example, when we are thinking about, or when we are toying with ideas, when we are at the phase of choosing a topic, so we read through a lot of articles, or I wouldn't say articles, even books, or probably even refer the dictionary, try to understand what is what, right? So that is the concept of, that's the purpose of literature review, or at the stage of problem identification, which is to enlighten us on what is what. But when we are talking about the role of literature review at the time of writing up our discussion, we need to juxtapose our work in the light of what has been already done, so that we can compare and contrast and take things forward. So, or when you're talking about problem definition, our literature review helps us focus our research in a particular direction. So, am I audible now? Hello? Okay, audible. Fine. Okay.
Guna, once again, I think you have to use some headset or something. There is a complaint that there are lots of other disturbances around.
Okay, you just check now. Is it better?
It is better from my side. I don't know. Others, I think they have
Yes,
some.
even for participant side, it is better now.
Okay.
Yes,
Better?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so can we have a quick recap of, do we need to have a quick recap of what we have done till now?
I don't think so, ma'am.
Okay, I will do it fast. So for the benefit of, I'm sorry for the bad audio. So far we had a recap of what we did yesterday, because in a way, what we are discussing now is a sequel to yesterday's discussion. Yesterday's session set the stage, okay? Next, we moved on to understanding the concept of research, and we threw light on 3 keywords. 1, research is systematic. 2, it draws a lot on literature. 3, it helps us answer certain questions. So we brought in the concept of research question, literature, and also being systematic. That means there should be rigor in our research. Then we talked about what it means to be scholarly. That means it has to be detailed studies involved. So we said we need to focus on that. Now, then we talked about scholarly publications. We talked about the concept of peer-reviewed journal articles. We said what it means to be peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed means having thorough review or thorough critique or thorough evaluation of our entire manuscript, right from our introduction, our title, abstract, methods, findings, and results. It's just not getting review comments by saying concise your article into 10 pages. That's not peer review. So there is a lot into scholarly publications. Then we said there are 3 R's of scholarly publications, which is reading, reflection, and review. Why reading? Because it involves detailed study. So unless we read through, we will not be able to build on our thoughts. So we need that reading. We also need to reflect. That means think through what we have read, what we want, how we want to present our ideas, how our ideas are different from what is what. And we also need to constantly critique our own work. So that's the essence of review. Then we also said that as part of scholarly publications, the authors need to focus, have good, good understanding of the subject matter, of the research methods, and also the academic writing techniques. So these 3, so this it's like a tripod stand. So these 3 contribute to good attempts at publication. We said we also recalled one reporting which says that most research, the potential of research is lost because of wrong research questions, poor design, or because it's not published also, and why sometimes it's poorly reported. I mean, inadequate information. So this sets the stage for us to really focus on research itself, so that we'll have a noteworthy publication. So that's the context. Now we touched upon the research process. We all know about it. So I will skip that. Instead, I'll go to the next slide, which focuses on what all should we pay attention to when it comes to designing your research project. When you want to roll out your research work, what all should you pay attention to? So the authors are referring to 2 aspects of design, which is conceptual design and technical design. So when they in research, we talk about 3 worlds. One is the real world, that means the world as it exists. Second is the theoretical world, which is our conceptualization of that world. It's like looking out of your window. So what do you want to report about? So do you want to talk about a child who's playing, or do you want to talk about the birds, or do you want to report about the trees in your area? So each one will be your school of thought. So that is the theoretical world. That means your conceptualization of the real world. We can't do justice to it. Then we move on to the empirical world. That means you try to draw measurements, try to ascertain whether what you have projected in your conceptual world is right or wrong, or is verified, or is or rejected, and then you connect to the conceptual world and then contribute to the real world. That means your understanding of the whole issue. So in this context, these authors are talking about conceptual design and technical design. So they have, in terms of conceptual design, they have talked about problem definition, research questions, research objectives, conceptual model, operationalization. Similarly, when it comes to technical design, about research design and reporting. Now, the rest of my presentation follows this flowchart, and we'll be talking about the checks and balances that we need to adhere to in terms of making our research noteworthy so that it becomes publication worthy. So that's the premise in which I'm structuring my presentation. So my thesis in a way is, unless we have the research straight or the research noteworthy or good enough, we will not be able to come up. In case there are a lot of flaws in the research design itself, then our findings may be disputed. So my suggestion is, let's focus on the research when we are designing it, so that it is we can have the end in mind, so that it becomes publication worthy. Now, talking about problem identification, it refers to identifying your area of research. So I pointed out that originality is a must. So originality, some refer to as novelty, some refer to as uniqueness, key contributions, what is the research potential? Those are some terms that people ask. So what is unique about your study? Why is it worth doing it when so many others are professing to do such a study? So what is the key takeaway? What is the unique selling proposition of our research? So that should be established in anybody's research career. Then another keyword that we need to be concerned about while choosing a topic is feasibility. And we should have that interest in carrying out research Of course, degrees matter, but the journey also matters. So we really, it's good that we will be associated with the topic with which we are convinced about. And then we moved on to literature review. Literature review, it talks about, it includes conceptual and empirical review. Now, I think we took a break when we were talking about the different functions of review of literature at different stages of the research. So when it's at the introduction stage, the focus of introduction in the sense when we are more about when we are still yet to decide on the topic, or we are still toying with the idea of a particular topic, we are more into general reading, trying to understand what is what, trying to understand whether it's my cup of tea. You know, that's the reading and that's the role of literature. When you're talking about deciding on your research questions, it is more rigorous because you have to rely on your research gaps. So that is the focus of literature review at that point in time. When you're talking about discussions, discussion state, that means discussion about your results. The role of review of literature is more to compare and contrast what your work is in the light of what others have done. How is my work similar to what others have reported? How is my work different from what others have reported, and what could be the reason for that? That's the role of literature review. Now, my only plea here is let's refer standard journals. Of course, a lot of cost issues are involved, but we should find ways to work around the issue, because unless we pitch on the right journal, we will not be able to publish, or our findings or our research gaps will not be that appropriate. So we need to really refer to standard journals. Each discipline will have its own set of standard journals. So I think that's one key takeaway. Now these days we rely on online resources, and when we Google, there are so many journals which claim to be international, but it's not that international actually. So of course they are easily available, but we have to take a conscious call on what resources we are going to rely on, what we are not going to rely on. So probably getting membership in good institutional libraries. I think we should find some way out to get access to good journal articles. Now, when we are doing literature review, we should be very conversant with the classic works. That means the who's and who of that particular domain, and also the landmark study, or it's also known as the landmark studies. Say, for example, if we are talking about organization behavior, we cannot talk about organization behavior without talking about Hawthorne experiment. So if we say that I'm talking about the role of group dynamics without referring to Hawthorne experiment, that means I'm not well read. That's the meaning. So we should ensure that we are conversant with the classic works and also the recent publication. That means at least the last 10 years, what is what, right? And then one tip that I want to share here is, I know it's very demanding to read papers. Sometimes it may sound like, or it may be like Greek and Latin, because so many numbers, high funda language may be very tough to manage. But we could utilize things like review articles. Nowadays, it's the concept of systematic reviews is evolving. Quite a few systematic review articles are published, so they are very, very comprehensive. They give you the what of it, the how to measure it, what are the pitfalls, everything of it. So they give it in a nutshell. So systematic reviews, and similarly meta-analytic reviews. Those articles also, they make some analysis of reviews, but those could be handy. Similarly, as researchers, it's good to maintain a database of the articles that we review. Okay. And we also, the database in the sense, a simple Excel sheet would suffice. I mean, that's very easy because you can edit and compose the way you want. Keep track of the author, the journal, because suddenly you find that that particular piece of work interesting, you want to put it in your thesis or in your paper, but you don't have the reference, then it becomes an issue. So it's good to maintain a database of what you have done, and also keep a log of your readings. We rely a lot on e-resources, but at least the tag option, the highlight option in your PDF documents, those things will come in handy if you are not comfortable with printouts. So that means we should read and identify what we take away from that article. So these are the do's or the things or the pointers that comes in that is important when you're talking about literature review. Believe me, it's good to invest on literature review. It's just not a compilation that we put at the end just to fill some pages. It is very, very important because it gives us a very firm understanding of the issue. Now, a sequel to the literature review is identification of the research gaps. Nowadays, people talk a lot about research gaps. Why? Because it adds to the originality of a research work. Because research gap refers to the missing pieces in the existing literature. So, till date, so many people have studied about this aspect of a particular issue. Hence, there are other aspects which need to be explored or are underexplored. So we are going to learn about it, or we are going to try to make an entry into that place. Now, one thing you need to understand, we cannot study all the research gaps at one go. So we have to take one meaningful portion. That is the element of feasibility in our research endeavor. So we have to take about one aspect of the research gap and try to make an attempt in carrying out the research. So how do we keep track of research gaps? From where do we call out research gaps? Now, systematic reviews or review of literature articles itself will do, or our own review of literature, if it's good enough, that will also give us insights. Similarly, when we are taking standard papers, especially the recent ones which relate to our topic, when you're exploring the section on discussion, when you're exploring the section on scope for future research, I think those will give us insight. So these are some handy tips. This is not the only way to do it, but these are some handy tips for us to get some insights. We just need this spark and to take it forward. So this goes into research gaps. Once we identify the research gap in our area of work, we have to define the problem. One of the authors says problem definition is nothing but putting a boundary around what you want to study. It means that you have to identify your characteristics of interest, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, where you want to do it. So this problem definition is very, very important because it gives you focus, it helps you scope your work, in a way, again, contributing to the feasibility aspect. To say, I'm interested in only this part of my work and not the other part. So we should be very clear in when it comes to documenting or writing about the problem definition. That's the statement of the problem. Even in my subsequent slide, that's also one area where we lack. When we ask our students to write a statement of the problem, it's just 2 lines that they come out. But when you ask them to write the introduction, they come up with 10 pages. So that gives a mismatch on our ability to compile from existing resources vis-a-vis our ability to write our own inputs. So we should be very clear about problem definition. That's very important. Now, next we move on to the research questions. Research questions, they need to be answered. These are questions that need to be answered in the course of the research. This is also one of the keywords that we saw in the definition. So research question is a buzzword and it's a must answer. What is the focus of your research? For what issue or for what question are you trying to find answers? That's the meaning of research question. This will yield to your research objectives. So research question, research objectives all go hand in hand. So we should not miss that link. There are other aspects to this link which we will see subsequently. Now, again, from where do we get this research question? From the research gap. So from the research gap, it's a big ocean. From that, what aspect of it that are you interested in studying? So that's your research question. Now, it's good. Now, the way we formulate our research question is very important because that, in a way, will determine your statistical test. Say, for example, I want to, if I'm saying I want to understand the differences in a particular concept, that means when you are talking about hypothesis testing for difference, you have to apply the test that apply to test differences. You cannot do correlation. So the way we phrase our research questions matter. So we have to pay attention to it. So it's just not throwing a question form, but it's also paying attention to what we really mean by that question. So that is one pointer. The next is your research objective. That's a statement for this, a to-do statement regarding your research question, which if our research question is well formulated, our research objective will be a cakewalk, right? Now, increasingly, we talk about model testing, conceptual models. So it's your framework regarding your variables. Now, it depends a lot on theorization. That means your logical reasoning to come to a particular proposition. That means if you're saying A leads to B, you need to have a lot of reasoning, lot of substantiation to say why you think A will lead to B. And if you're trying to understand the linkages between A, B, and C, then you need to establish why you think B should be in the link and how you think B will influence, the presence of B will influence C. So that is the, so conceptual model, the diagram may be easily understandable, but the theorization matters, and this theorization is very unique to the researcher. So it's the brainchild of the researcher. You will have to devise not only just give the conceptual definitions, but also try to understand the linkages. Now, again, so this depends on your literature review also, because existing literature will say how these two variables behaved in their research. So how are you going to extend an existing model, probably bring in a new variable, or are you going to try to test whether what happened there is going to apply in my context? So those things will be based on literature. So literature review is very important. Now, this conceptual model has an implication in terms of our hypothesis, in terms of our spelling out of hypothesis. So we should be very, very careful in terms of the conceptual models. There are some rules in terms of highlighting mediators, highlighting moderators, if you're talking about them. So we have to follow the conventions. We just can't put arrows anywhere and everywhere the way we want. So there are conventions. Now, in this diagram that that's being projected, it's a simple model. It talks about three sets of independent variables, how they influence a particular dependent variable. So that's, I'm just giving an example. So we're not dwelling more on it. We are only saying your conceptual model should be derived from your literature. Number two, our logical reasoning. Logical reasoning in the sense, lot of substantiation. That's the context in which we're talking. Next is operationalization. Operationalization or operational definition refers to the definition of the key constructs or variables in the way you want to measure them. So it's just not the definition given by the researcher, but the key word here is measurement, which means how you want to measure it. So this again is just not a page filling exercise. It's a very important exercise because it tells you how you're going to measure that particular variable, which means it will impact your data collection in terms of the scale you're going to use or the scale you're going to construct. So we should be very careful when it comes to operationalization. So in a way, it tells what comes under the ambit of the term and how we are going to measure it. So we should be very, very focused. So it has an impact on tool construction. So we should be very, very clear. We will understand the linkages a little down further. So the next thing in the flowchart was about research design. So some authors refer to it as research strategy. So it's the blueprint or plan for, Curlinger uses the term, it's a blueprint for collection, measurement, and analysis of data. So when you're talking about collection, you're referring to your population, your sampling, your source of data, your unit of analysis. So we need to pay attention to all this. Sometimes there are research papers or research reports which don't report adequately about this. So we really have to keep track of what all comes under each subheading and then adequately report about them. Why we are presenting it before the phase of publication? Because sometimes if any of this aspect is compromised, so that means our publication itself or the chances for publication will be compromised because we are assuming that we are attempting good journal publications. Now, the thing is, the research design should be in sync with our research questions. So if you're saying you want to, increasingly nowadays, people are talking about experiments even in social sciences. So if you think that you want to only describe, but have an experimental design, that doesn't go hand in hand. So what is your research question and how do you intend to achieve that research goal? It should go hand in hand. That's the message, right? So it has to be chosen appropriately. The next is regarding tool construction. So I had talked about the link earlier. So the link which talks about the linkages between research questions. So what are your research questions? That will pave way for the research objectives. Now from the research objectives, based on the variables, we will call out the hypothesis, which we have to measure. Those variables we definitely need to measure. and then we have to test it so that we can close the loop of hypothesis formulation and hypothesis testing. So this link between research question, objective, hypothesis, data measurement, and statistical testing, we should never forget. Sometimes people, in the introduction chapter, people will profess to study about a particular issue. But as we go on to methodology chapter, it's all watered down. Suddenly it's a new concept or only one aspect of that concept being studied. So that is why I'm trying to highlight this as point number one. Let's not forget this linkage. When we claim to study something, we should definitely study that and complete the loop. Now, this tool construction, when we are doing it, we should be very focused in terms of including the right variables. Why? Because otherwise we will not be doing justice to the linkage that we talked about a little earlier. Then we also need to pay attention to the level of measurement. Now, simple thing like age. Now, when we are asking age as actuals, then it becomes ratio data. When we are talking about age as I am younger, elder, that is also an indicator of your age. Then it is not, the treatment of data or the level of data varies upon how we are asking the questions. So we should be very clear about what kind of, how we are framing the questions, and also because it has an implication on the statistical test. Sometimes it may seem very frivolous, but when it comes to statistical testing point of view, then we know, I wish I had asked this question instead of this. So those thoughts will appear. So we have to be very vigilant. So it's in this context, it's very important that we concur with a couple of people, discuss with well-wishers, so that we are going the right track, do the right referencing also. Now, we use a lot of standardized tools. So when it comes to choice of tool, whether it's questionnaire, interview schedule, interview guide, appropriateness matters. And when you're using language to language specific populations, so compatibility matters. So all those things will talk about the validity of findings. So we should be very vigilant when it comes to the choice of tool. Similarly, when we are using scales, we should ensure that we get permission and use, and also attribute the source. Just getting permission and not attributing the source is also a crime. So it's better to get the permission and also attribute. Attribute the source means acknowledge from whose scale is it from. Now, when it is a scale developed, especially in the Western context or in any other context, we should be doubly sure that it is applicable in our work. Now, these are some loopholes or small things which make a large difference in our findings. So if the reviewer just asks a question by saying, what precautions did you take to ensure this Westernized scale was applicable to the Indian context? And if we have not taken those steps or those precautions, then we'll be fumbling for answers. So in this context, we have to ascertain that the question wording, say for example, you're talking about concept of family. Concept of family in the Indian context is definitely different from the Western context. So we may assume it to be the same, but it's very different. So we have to be very careful in terms of how we adopt scales. Then we also need to pay attention to reliability, validity. So reliability, validity of that particular scale that we are trying to use in the light of our study data. If it's not working out, I think we have to, instead of feeling urged or instead of feeling pressed to complete your data collection, I think we have to stop and take call on, are we going in the right direction? Because if we don't have the right reliability, validity for the scales that we are using, then all our results and findings will be skewed. So we have to be very careful. Now, if many claim that they are doing scale construction, but believe me, scale construction is a very, very rigorous process. Sometimes scale construction itself is a PhD thesis. So please follow norms, your concurrent validity, predictive validity, and all those things. So just let's not throw terms by saying validity was established. We need to report those results. And there are journal articles which talk about scale construction, what all needs to be reported. So if you have done scale construction, so please follow those protocols also. Now, when we go on to data collection, once when we believe that our tool is fine, when your pre-testing is done and you think things are good to go for your data collection, it's always good to have data collection plan. One second. Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Okay. Can we continue with data collection or do I need to recap somewhere?
Oh, ma'am, yeah, please continue with the data collection, ma'am.
Okay. I hope the participants are also in sync. I'm sorry. Okay. Now, when it comes to data collection, we really need to pay attention. Now, it's good to have a data collection plan, especially when we are having multiple categories of respondents. Otherwise, there is the risk of missing out on a particular respondent category, or when what I mean by a data collection plan is to have a matrix of your respondent categories, the universe size, your percentage of sample that you want to draw. So, and what is the tool of data collection that you want to administer. So that way we are foolproof, we don't miss out on anybody, and we are on track. So please have a data collection plan. And then always try for representativeness. We always talk about sampling when we talk about representative sample. So yeah, nowadays we talk about Google Forms and all, but how representative is it? Those things needs to be answered. So when we are doing conventional research, it's good to go by your probability as much as it is feasible or it's applicable to our study. So let's try for representativeness. And we should also ensure quantity and quality of data. What I mean by that, quantity is your sample size, and quality, I mean the completeness of the data from the right respondent. I'm a right respondent, I don't mean a cooked up data or a person who's set up for giving data, but the right profile of respondents whom you intend to survey. So we need to focus on quantity and quality. Sometimes quality will come in the form of, wrongly filled schedules, half-filled schedules, or, schedules which are, have their own patterns. So we should ensure that we focus on both the quantity and quality of data. Now, once we are through with the data collection, halfway we are in the research process and we're extremely happy. But before we go on for data analysis, we should clean the data thoroughly. Data cleaning is it's a big process in the sense we are not fudging data here. We are looking for outliers. We are looking for missing data. We are looking for wrong entries. So, and doing the needful so that the data, when it goes for data analysis, is in good shape. That's the meaning of data cleaning that I'm talking about. And as researchers, I think it's good that we invest on it. Okay, rather than outsourcing to statisticians, because they may not have the time to clean the data. So it's good that we clean the data. Next is data analysis. We should know based on the research questions, I said it has an implication on your statistical tests. Now, so your data analysis, there are multiple statistical tests that are applicable, and any statistical package for the data we input, we will get the output. Okay, even if you want to give male and marks obtained and compute correlation, we will get an output. But that doesn't make sense because gender and marks obtained, gender being a categorical variable, we cannot apply correlation. So we have to know which test to apply when and apply the right test accordingly. Now, if our purpose of the research exercise or analysis is on description, apply your descriptive statistics. If you want to explore differences, apply t-test or ANOVA or its parallel test in terms of parametric. Then if you want to check relationship, apply correlation. So there are certain thumb rules, so let's follow it. Sometimes people miss out on this and it's a glaring errors when we get thesis for evaluation or when we go for Viva. So I think it's very dicey when we handle such situations. So let's be sure about what we are trying to present. Then the analysis that we apply will also depend on the level of measurement. So that was one indicator when I talked in terms of your tool. So how are you asking the data? Accordingly, the stress that you can apply for it will has a linkage or has an implication. So we have to be very clear in terms of the level of measurement, what kind of data you can apply. Say, for example, I already said for nominal data or categorical data, you cannot apply correlation. So these are some of the thumb rules that we need to be conversant with and also follow. The next is a flow chart. I think when we refer this website, abacusbates.edu, it's available. Now, the only takeaway again here is that saying your type of statistical test that we apply will depend on your data distribution, whether it's normal. So if it's normal, then you apply your parametric or otherwise. So that is your assumption. Number two, it depends on your type of data. Number three, it depends on the type of research question. So these are the precursors that we need to keep in our mind when we really want to apply statistical tests. Next comes to research reporting. I'm still talking about the research process. When you're talking about research reporting, we are referring to documentation about the research, its process and outcomes. So when you're talking about reporting, we need to talk about 3 C's. First one is clarity. Sometimes we get articles for review, we are unable to understand what the author is trying to communicate. So we have to be extra cautious. It's good to have simple sentences, break our ideas. It's okay to break our ideas, put it in simple sentences and communicate so that we can put forth our ideas in a very, very clear manner. Second, it should be concise. That means it should be parsimonious. We should not be very verbose. Verbose means trying to write a lot to express a small thing. If it's warranted, yes, but just to fill the space or because we are not able to present something else, I think that's somewhere something is wrong. So we should be very concise in our presentation, use the right number of words to communicate our ideas. That's being concise. Then coherence is extremely important. Coherence is your logical flow in your article or in your writing or in your structuring. So the flow of ideas is extremely important. So we really need to keep track of these 3 C's. So even if we are finished your thesis or going to submit, please ensure that are we clear in our communication, are we concise, and are we is our presentation logical. Now, when it comes to a research report, I think there are 2 no's that we need to take care of. One is know what to report. That means the templates we need to follow. Each university will have its own format or whatever each organization. Similarly, take care of the word count. Adhere to academic writing conventions in terms of, especially in text citations, because you're going to rely a lot on paraphrasing rather than direct quotes. And increasingly, there is a thrust on anti-plagiarism. So we have to be very, very careful in terms of writing in our own words. So please let us adhere to this academic writing conventions. And we also need to know what to present in terms of statistical results, how to present it, right? So those things we need to know. Similarly, then other know that we need to know is what is reported. When we go to Viva, we ask questions. People say that they blink when we say it's in your report, right? So it's like we tell the students, when you claim something in your CV, you should know the in and out of it. Similarly, when we claim something or when we put it in writing in a report, we should also know in and out of it. So we should know what is reported as well. Now, all these things are pointers or insights when it comes to strengthening our research work. Now, we are moving on to the next phase, which is what it means to write for a journal publication. Now, writing for journal publication is very different. Why? Say, for example, in a journal, we talked about a 200, 250-page document. But when you're talking about a journal article, we're talking about maximum 15 to 20 pages. So the word count is totally different. And it's more focused. Probably you had multiple research questions in your thesis, but in a journal article, not necessarily. So it's more concise, more focused, and it's also a different purpose. A thesis we would have submitted to get a degree. Here it's not for a degree, it's only to establish a scholarship and also to contribute to the body of knowledge. So it's very different on these accounts. So what does it mean to write a journal publication? What does it require? First, it definitely requires a thought or the spark or the inclination. It starts with us. It's okay to submit a thesis, get a degree and say into it, or can we further it by publishing it, taking on independent research and, progressing that thought. So it starts with the thought. Second, as I already told, we need to have reasonable subject matter knowledge. One, we would have got it because of the research exercise. Two, we know about the research methods. We also need to be conversant with the academic writing norms for journals. Then we also need discipline and commitment because there are timelines to fulfill. So we need to have that. Then it's good to have collaboration. I wouldn't say must, but it's good to have because we have the saying which says if you want to go fast, you do it alone. If you want to go far, do it with people. So teamwork actually pays. So it's good to collaborate. So please try to get good, working partners to help us out in the scholarly exercise and participate in review. Subject yourself also to review. So those things are important. Now, what is it? Now, coming to the final two slides, few slides in terms of what it means to convert our research to publication. So, what are the basic insights? First one, let's decide to publish. Many of us have the writer's block, no time, that's not the priority. I mean, so many reasons. So, let's make time to do it. If we feel that we may not be good enough, it's okay, but let's make that first attempt. So, let's first decide to publish. Let's start with small attempts. We may not. HD Madam talked about A-star, A-journals. They are the top journals. We may not make it in day one, but that nothing prevents us from attempting in a few attempts, right? So let's start with small attempts. In this context, I would like to say we can first start with writing book reviews, case studies, and then write small articles, and then move on. Progress or follow up with incremental improvements. So let's not get stagnated at one level. Same conference proceedings which come up with publications. I mean, that's not the only way to progress. There are other ways to enhance our scholarship, so we should consider that. Now, once we have a piece of research done, let's decide what aspect of it we want to publish. Now, what aspect of it? It could be based on a research questions or certain, you could divide your research work into meaningful portions and develop the introduction, methodology, design, and reporting accordingly and report. Now, it's always good to have a sketch because even a 2000 word article, we will not be able to write it on day one or at one go. If you are doing it, then you are great. But most of us, it's going to be tough. So I think it's good to put the sketch in terms of what points do I want to highlight in the introduction? What aspect of it? How do I want to introduce the topic? Just put the keywords and then start developing, elaborating, substantiating your ideas. Then your article will take a better shape. And your this writing is never done in one day. It takes multiple editions. That means multiple versions. So we need to consistently work on it. So it's good to have an outline and then elaborate. Then again, I said let's collaborate. So in terms of data collection, in terms of analysis, writing, there are many ways to collaborate. So please collaborate. That's a good way to learn. Or sometimes you can have a good mentor with whom you can work, say for things like research grants. So that gives you opportunities for you to collaborate, right? And then one practical aspect is please identify who your co-authors are and spell them out rightly in which order. Otherwise, it gives some bitterness at the end of the day. I mean, improper acknowledgement, all those things. So this is a practical aspect. Please pay attention to it. So these are the basics. These things are within our control, the first slide. The next slide is regarding how to do the groundwork in terms of your journal. So first we need to know who are the journals in our field. What are the journals? Which are the journals? Who are the operators? Good ones, please. Let's scout for good ones. Then identify the right journal. That means this is the research focus. Some journals may not be interested in qualitative work. So if we have done qualitative work, let's not attend those journals. That's basic common sense. So we need to identify the right journal. Then the right journal, other criteria could be based on the wealth of information we have. You think it's a very, very mini research, then obviously we'll not pitch for something too high. So identify the right journal. Then identify the right article templates. There are some existing articles that are published we may be aspiring for a particular journal. Identify articles which have addressed similar issues, which have similar research questions, probably different variables, and or in a totally different discipline. Get some templates and try to understand their writing style. And then I'm not asking us to copy, but I'm only asking us to have some guides in the sense something to give us some direction. Then definitely we need to adhere to the journal guidelines for article submission in the sense their structuring. Say, for example, Emerald has a very, very different way of structuring articles, especially the abstract compared to compared to a Sage journal. So when we want to apply for Emerald, we should adhere to that abstract composition in that manner, not that of a Sage. So we need to be very particular about the journal guidelines. There are a lot of learning resources, a lot of online learning resources. Of course, print media is also available, but in the comfort of our home, we a lot of publications have guidelines for authors or learning resources for authors. Similarly, international universities, they have websites or web pages dedicated to writings itself. We have things like Writing Center, library guides. So please, I have just mentioned a few, couple of them. Just Google for library guides, writing, thesis writing. You will get a lot of learning resources. Please keep in touch with those resources and upgrade ourselves. Then there are a lot of scholarly conferences which pay a lot of attention to knowledge ideation. That means you share your view, people contest your view or complement your view or contribute to your view. So there is a lot of groundwork that happens in terms of your knowledge, in terms of cementing your idea. So please attend such, we could consider attending such scholarly conferences which strive for knowledge building. We could attend specialized workshops as well. Then we also need to keep track of call for papers so that if we are in that trust area, then probably we could respond. Now, the next slide talks about what we need to do when it comes to writing. First one, we need to give our best shot. Everybody cannot be a Rudyard Kipling, but everybody can give our best. So we need to give our best shot. Similarly, we should never, whatever our pressing need, whatever the timeline or whatever the stress we are going through, we should never submit raw manuscripts. It's going to put them off. So let's really do our best. When we bring it to a proper shape, then we should send it from our desk. That's point number one. Next, even before you submit your article, we should have it reviewed. Have your co-scholars or peers or well-wishers or your mentors to go through your work, question your work, see how you can strengthen your arguments. Probably they may have some insights on how you can rephrase your work. So those things is very essential when it comes to having your manuscript reviewed even before you submit. Then we need to proofread our work. English is not our mother tongue, so we really there is scope for making errors. So we really need to have our work proofread. Then we need to pay attention to attributions. That means when we have borrowed work from somebody else's work, and we have presented in our writing to substantiate our point of view, we need to attribute the source. So we have to pay attention to this attribution. Very, very increasingly important. Then when we are using copyrighted material, it's good to get the permission and do, especially when we are using standardized scales. So we need to pay attention to that. Then whatever the protocol the journal demands in terms of the cover letter, submission of cover letter, e-submission, in terms of review and compliance with review, all those things we need to follow up. Then we need to take the feedback in the right spirit. Let's not get dejected or get angry saying, who are they to talk about my work? I have put in so much labor. Let's take in the right spirit and try to respond to it positively, proactively, so that the article will be published in that particular endeavor. If it's not totally working out, then probably we can look at other venues. Again, if our article is not accepted, it's okay, we have another chance. So they didn't find merit in it, but that doesn't mean our work does not have merit. So we will find venues to publish which will find merit in our work. So that's the way we have to take it forward. Let's avoid predatory journals. There's increasingly many predatory journals. I think it's going to reduce our wealth rather than increase our knowledge base. So we have to focus on that. Now, let's not compromise on academic integrity in terms of reporting, in terms of attribution and all those things. The last slide is about my review experiences when work comes to me for review. What's the most common thing that I have observed? I found very, very vague ROLs. It's more a compilation rather than there is no flow to our research work per se. So the ROL is not very, it may be very voluminous. We may have multiple pages of it, but what's the direct takeaway to the research problem, to the conceptual framework? it's very limited. So vague ROS was one major thing that I go through. Then poor logical reasoning. It's like okay, I want it, so I say it. That's not the way it happens. You have to build arguments based on, deriving from substantiation. That means what others have told, they have found like this. So I believe that this, because A and B are linked in this way, B and C could be linked in this way. So that's an extension of theory. So we need to have that logical reasoning. Now, I think one reason for poor logical reasoning is because we are not very adept in expressing ourselves in writing. But this will come with practice. That's my belief. Then there is no depth in arguments. Again, it's all like tall claims. There is no conviction. We are having word count, but we are not having. There's no merit in those words, so there's no depth in arguments. Sometimes sweeping statements, we just generalize. There's no attribution. Those things don't go. Then improper structuring of text. Improper structuring of text defeats the logic of coherence. When it's not well structured, when arguments don't follow after each other, then it results in improper structuring or lack of coherence. Then poor operationalization. Reduction will be fine. Statistics will be very bombastic, but when we don't know how we are measuring, when you're not sure how you are measuring a particular thing, because any statistical package will give you the output. But if you cannot establish the link between your theoretical world and your empirical world, it's going to be an issue. So operationalization is one major thing. Then there is again this disconnect between conceptualization, operationalization, application of the wrong statistics. It really ticks us off. So we have to be very careful in terms of what we have to apply. And then it's sometimes there's compromised problem statement or discussion. That means what? It's very sketchy. Why? Because we are not adept in terms of writing. That's probably one reason. Why? Again, because it's our own contribution or our own writing that should come in place. Somebody would not have written the problem statement as part of their ROL. We need to derive that problem statement. We need to derive that discussion. So that requires a lot of practice. Missing references, people will give the in-text citation, it's not in the reference. So it's a fun task. When articles come for review, that's the first thing. Easy way to decide whether an article is going to be rejected, whether people have paid attention to the composition of the work. Check, randomly the references in the missing in the reference section. Vis-a-vis now we have soft copies, so Control F, we find it's not. So we have to pay attention to your in-text citation or also your references. Then again, the benefit or the boon or bane of computer, I don't know, this copy paste errors. So we have to pay attention. Now, when we have these things, it only says that we have not, as a writer, I have not paid attention to my work. Then how can the reviewer spend the time to assess or gauge the work, right? So spelling errors. In research, we say there should be consistency. Even if we are using one spelling error, let it be throughout the article. But sometimes people come with multiple versions of the same spelling. So we should be very, very vigilant in terms of copy editing, proofreading. Then non-adherence to journal norms. Say, for example, word limit, people don't follow, or it's not within the scope of the article of the journal. Those things are issues. So these are the basic review comments or my experiences. I'm sure the other reviewers would also have similar ones. I just want to close with this quote, which says that somehow make writing happen, either at your end or at somebody's end. So it's up to us. I'm sure it will happen with practice. That's my view. Thank you. I'm open to questions.
Hemakumar?
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Hemakumar, I have a request.
Yes, ma'am.
Please circulate the feedback form in both the chat boxes. Then you start reading out the questions.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, there's one question sent to me which says how review of literature will be available for original ideas. It's about from the reading and from the deduction of ideas that we can make sense. It doesn't present itself by saying it's original. When we say reviewed literature, we are trying to put things together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Each one has studied one aspect of an issue. We try to aggregate those aspects and try to look at the missing gaps. And that missing gap will be a good source for original ideas. And that's the way I would like to take it.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, am I audible, ma'am? Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, Matli.
The question from Usha: what tense and what voice should be used while writing a journal paper?
It depends on your the journal that you're looking at, because when we were taught, we were told use in the past tense, use in the third person. But there are good journals which talk about we. So it depends on the journal that you're targeting.
Okay, ma'am.
But I would prefer past tense. I would prefer the third person.
Okay. Question from Priscilla. Is there a possibility that when we submit a paper, the publication doesn't find any fault? If so, then is our paper good or bad? If so, then is our paper good or bad? What does us say? Hello, ma'am?
Yeah, it depends on with whom we are benchmarking, right? There's a possibility that the journal is extremely good and our article is also extremely good. You get a 10 on 10, that's great. Sometimes we get a mediocre journal for whom even good enough article is also great. So because they want to fill the pages, so they will also not give many comments. So there's no straightforward answer. I think what we have to look at is a work good, then we get it done in a good publication.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Next question. Could you share something about plagiarism, and can you name some plagiarism software?
Plagiarism software, I think we have a devoted session for that. So I think we will park it for that session. It's the day after tomorrow, right, Shakti?
Okay, ma'am. Question from Maithili. Can the paper published in conference proceedings without ISBN number be published in a journal? I'll repeat, ma'am. Can the paper published in the conference proceedings without ISBN?
Yeah, it can be published, but it's not valid. No, we also need to balance the UGC mandate vis-a-vis our own interest also.
Okay, ma'am. Next question from Pius. Can you tell me some social work journal wherein we can give papers related to our field work?
Road Madras School of Social Work has its journal. All the leading schools of social work, they have their journals. So I'm sure they'll be very open to fieldwork experiences.
Okay, ma'am. How to do?
We're talking about the Indian context. It depends on the depth of your information. If it's really good, there are international journals also which are open. Definitely, they'll be extremely happy to receive articles from India. But depends on the depth of information that we have and how we are presenting it or documenting it and taking it forward.
Same question from another question from Pius. How to do literature review on a topic which has not been studied so far? Like
a topic like that. I mean, it's very. There would not be anything straightforward as a new topic because everything is an extension. Everything would have had a precursor. Say, for example, at one point in time, like a work-life balance was new. Was a new concept. People would not have studied about it, but one of its close relatives is work-family conflict. So it would start by reading a lot in terms of work-family conflict and then extending those findings to work-life balance and then making our contribution. So try to identify key related themes and then start with that literature. But it's very rare that there's anything like an unexplored area, unless you come up with some path-breaking research. But I would appreciate if you're coming up with that.
Next question is from YouTube. What is the hierarchy of journal like SCI, Scopus, UGC? Among the three, which is hierarchy? That's what she is asking.
I think we'll park that for the day after tomorrow. Madam will respond.
Okay, ma'am. Next question from.
There was one question question regarding unpaid Scopus Index journal. So I request Madam to talk about that also, please.
Okay, next question from YouTube. Could you please elaborate on validation, adaptation, and psychometric properties of tool, ma'am, for PhD research work?
For PhD research worker.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, there are a lot of resources which talk about, there is adaptation, psychometric properties. What is the first keyword, sir? First aspect of the question.
I'll repeat, ma'am. Validation, adaptation, and psychometric properties for tool.
Okay, in your own discipline, good journals, please Google for articles which talk about tool construction. So they would have reported in terms of the aspects of normative validity, discriminant validity, predictive validity, concurrent, construct, all those things. So that will be a good guide for us to take it forward. But I would suggest refer to your own discipline. I mean, that means there's better chance of having your work sold.
Next question from Narmada. How to find standard journals for literature review?
Okay, journals that don't publish whatever you send, which has a thorough review process. So I think that would be a standard journals. But if you're looking at management discipline, they have their own indexing. So I'm sure each discipline has its own indexing in terms of what is a A grade journal, what is the next level. So that would be a standard journal is any journal that will give you some good review comments. Anything you send, if they publish, then that's not great. It's good to have a publication, but that's not there's no value addition in it.
Okay, ma'am. Next question is, can you give us some insight regarding ethical problems when doing a human study?
Quite a few. When you're talking about research ethics, there are two landmark things that was in contravention to human ethics, right? So first one was during the World War II when they did not treat the prisoners of war rightly. So that was that created a lot of hue and cry, which talked about research ethics. Then we had the syphilis experiment, which studied the progression of syphilis, but withheld treatment, though there was a very handy treatment that evolved during the course of research. So whether it's human subject or anybody or everybody or whatever domain, I think research ethics is very important. Why? Because if you are going to flout norms, then somebody else would be smarter enough to flout norms even better. So it's better to go with the rules of the game and adhere to the principles of no harm to the participants, anonymity, confidentiality, informed consent. That's increasingly important. And then not giving any false claims. No, I mean, there's integrity in your data reporting. All those things are a must.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, it is possible to link two different topics into one single topic with the insights gained from literature review?
Two aspects of a topic, probably two topics. If it's feasible, then you should give it a try. Feasible, logical, original, then you should give it a try. I'm not able to understand what you mean by two topics. But if you want to attempt something, if it's feasible, why feasible? Because if you're blending two different things, doesn't work out logically, then it may backfire. So actually, I'm not able to understand what you mean by two topics.
Okay, ma'am. Next question is, UGC CARE journalists is now available for free. Are there any sites or catalogs that can help with information?
UGC, they themselves have the website. Even I tried logging in. You have to register and then they give you the list. So please explore, or I think we can reserve it for the day after tomorrow's presentation, please.
One more question from Solomon. Could you say something about extended essay?
Sorry, sir, I'm not very conversant in that.
Okay, ma'am. I think we'll. There's a penultimate question, ma'am. This is first article which I'm writing. Yes. How should I find the good journal? How should I approach them? Should I mail them and send the manuscript? How to proceed?
Okay, it depends on one. You should be willing to take risk. My first article was only 700 words, and I tried for a national journal, and they very magnanimously said there should be more to this article, and they made me think. And I took those review comments, worked on it, and had it published. So nothing prevents you. I'm not going to stifle your enthusiasm. Please go for it. Make an attempt. attempt at least national journals. But if you think you have some path-breaking work that you have taken all the precautions in terms of your research design, I'm talking both about your choice of variables, conceptual, technical design aspect, then I think you should attempt any international journal itself.
Okay, ma'am.
Go for it. Unless we attempt, we will not know. So please go for it. It's only going to mean some time lag, because if at all they're going to ask for review comments or rejection, it's going to be a matter of time till you have it published. But unless you attempt, you will not know. So please go for it.
Last question, ma'am. Any single source for getting consolidated call for paper calls?
Sir. No, it's better to log into the regularly check the different publishers, or just Google for call for papers. A lot of things will come and you can filter what you want and take it. I have not heard of what a one-stop.
Hello, ma'am. This last question. Some tips to stay focused on our research, because while doing the literature review, the new ideas are intriguing, and we tend to deviate from our study. So how to overcome that?
Keep feasibility in mind. It's very easy to get strayed with ideas, but keep feasibility in mind. Say, for example, you're doing your MPhil or PhD. At the end of it, you also need to get your degree, right? Quality matters, but also finishing in a time-bound manner. So see what is your line of thinking. So many things will come. It's like going from point A to point B. So your focus is on going to point B. So many things will come. Only when it is of particular interest, you will stop, right? Say, for example, you are traveling from your home to college, you will stop only hopefully for the signals, and if there is an accident, you want to respond to some crisis, you will not stop everywhere and anywhere. So when you are reviewing literature also, many interesting thoughts will come, but not all will be related to our line of thinking. It will be related to our line of work, not our line of thinking. So I think with experience, we will know what we want. Focus on the variables that you want to talk about, you are really interested in, and try to go in that direction.
I think it's done, ma'am. I'm done with the question Q&A, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Hemakumar. Thanks a lot, Dr. Gunawati.
I just need a time, 1 minute.
Yeah.
I thank the participants also for your questions. I'm sorry for the interruptions. Thank you also to your organizers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Gunawati. I think it was sea of information starting from the first slide. But I just want to add one thing to the reply what you gave to one of the questions. I think it was asked by Dr. Maithili. She asked about publishing a paper which was published already in an ISBN book, and the same thing she asked whether she can publish it in a journal article. I think that question was not, the audio was not very clear when he asked.
I didn't understand the question correctly. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe we can't do double publication of the same work. I understood the question now. Thanks for highlighting.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I thank each and every one of you participants. It was great connecting with you all for all these 2 days. And I'm sure all of you know the rest of the 3 days title on the resource persons. So please be on time tomorrow also. We have a very interesting session tomorrow presenting quantitative and qualitative data for publication. So we will meet again tomorrow, the same time, 4 o'clock. I hope all of you have submitted your feedback form. Thank you very much. Can we leave now? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.